The most direct way to include ActionScript within Flash Professional is to write it directly on the timeline. This lesson will demonstrate this approach, and we'll go over some of the drawbacks associated with it. So here we have what is a basic document. We have a few things going on here though. One thing is that in our library, we have a movie clip symbol called ball. On the stage, we have an instance of that movie clip symbol. And if we look in the properties inspector, we can see that I've given it an instance name of ball, and it's all lowercase here. It doesn't have to be, but it's important when writing things in ActionScript to make sure that you have a good awareness of the case that you're using, because it is case sensitive. So I've also set up two layers, one for my actual ball, and one is an actions layer. And I don't have anything in this actions layer yet. So let's bring up our actions panel. We'll go to Window, Actions. All right, we're just going to collapse all that stuff over to the side there. And we already have our ball instance on the stage, so I don't actually have to declare that. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up an event listener to listen for clicks upon the stage, and then we're going to have the ball itself move to those coordinates. All right, so what we're going to do is add an event listener to our stage. So we can reference the stage just by typing in stage like this. So stage.add event listener. And then here we have to say what type of event we want to listen for. So we're listening for a mouse event. And the type of mouse event is a click. So mouse event.click. And then when that happens, we're going to invoke a function. And that function is going to be called onClick. And that function can be really called anything you want it to be called, just as long as it's not some sort of reserved method name or property or something like that. So to actually create the function, we use the keyword function, and then we name it, so onClick. And then we have to pass through our event. So to do that, we create an object that references that mouse event. And you can see as I did that, we actually got an import for us automatically that's importing from the flash.events package, the event class mouse event. So this last thing we need to do is define a return data type. So in this case, it's going to be void, since we're not actually returning anything. We're just kind of processing information within this function. So then we create these open and closed curly braces. And this defines sort of the body of our function. So here's where we put various commands that we want to execute every time this function is invoked. So in this case, we're going to reference our ball. So again, that is the movie clip instance on our stage. And we want to set its X property equal to mouse X. Mouse X is going to be the X position of our cursor. And the same thing for ball.y, set that to mouse Y. Okay. So let's try this out and see how it functions. We just go to Control, Test Movie, Test. All right, so here's our little ball, and it's in its original position. So when I click anywhere on the stage, you can see that the X and Y properties of that ball switch to exactly where my cursor is, because I'm reading those mouse X and mouse Y properties. So that works great. So this is a very basic example of how to use ActionScript on the timeline. If we go back to our timeline here, we can see on our actions layer, we actually have, aside from a little empty keyframe, we also have a small A right above it. And that indicates that we do in fact have ActionScript tied to this particular frame and layer. And the ActionScript is of course contained in the Actions panel, where we do our imports and declare our different variables and functions and so forth. So some of the drawbacks to this: when you code everything on the timeline, your code can be fragmented it can be sort of a mess because you're placing it in multiple places along the timeline. You could also place all of your code just in one frame on the timeline, but that's not very good either because then your code is just this big block of stuff. It's not very organized. Really, the best method of creating ActionScript is to use the package class system that's inherent to the language. While using packages and classes, you can also use things like private, public, protected to further define all of your variables and your methods. You can also do things such as extend other classes with your own custom classes. Really, there's a lot more you can do with ActionScript if you're not using the timeline. However, with that said, for some simple demonstration or a prototype or something like that, you may find it easier to initially do some of your work in the timeline and then later on refactor that all into classes. So this has been an example of how to write timeline ActionScript in Flash Professional CS6.